Ah, that excellent feeling of opening up a new video game console, going through the carefully packaged materials, finding your system, controller, power cable, and everything else you need to get your game on. It's so great. Brings you feelings of what's to come, what games you're looking forward to playing, and how long will this shit be around before the next system gets announced. Ever since I picked up my PS4 and Xbox One, I've been thinking about the other consoles I own and the memories I have of them. It feels so good to be remembering the times. Just like MJ! I have so many damn consoles and so many stories behind how I got them. But where the hell should I begin?
It was really hard to pick which system to talk about. But then I figured I can make a shitload of these videos. So fuck it, let's just theme these stories up. Today, let's talk about Nintendo consoles. Now, I already told the story of how I got my GameCube a long time ago, and you guys can click here, this general area. You guys can see that video? Yeah, around here. But today, let's talk about some of the other interesting Nintendo stories I have. Let's start with the NES.
My parents were barely married when they had me, which meant we were pretty damn poor when I was younger, so the idea of getting a video game console was laughable in my parents' eyes. We were eating like college students, if you know what I mean. I would barely get those cheap, shitty action figures, for fuck's sake. With that in mind, this story was told to me by my parents, because I was too damn young at the time to remember any of it. I was born in 1987, so even when I was alive, the NES had been out in the US for a few years. In 1990, when I was 3, I started playing the NES at my cousin's house. According to my parents, I loved playing NES. A lot. It was all I would do when I went over to my aunt and uncle's house. Eventually, the adults caught on to this. It was probably when I would mumble, NES, 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 over and over again while I was eating. My aunt ended up telling my parents she would get me an NES for Christmas, since she saw how goddamn obsessed I was, and just to wait until then and not buy it for me. It was fitting. The NES had been introduced to me at their house, and they would end up getting me one later that year. But nope. My parents tried waiting and waiting, but apparently I would really go apeshit every time I saw an NES at malls, Walmarts, and GameStops. Wait a minute, is that right? Was GameStop around back then?
Huh, technically yeah. Back then it was called Babbage's though. Actually, come to think of it, I kind of remember Babbage's as I got older. Huh, Babbage's. Oh man, the good old days.
Anyway, my parents really wanted to pick one up for me earlier than Christmas, and they did! I still don't know how they did it. We were too damn poor to afford that shit. Though, after careful thinking and research, I have 3 theories. 1, my dad robbed a bank. 2, my dad starved himself to save up cash. Or 3, S.H.I.E.L.D. gave it to them. Yeah, fucking S.H.I.E.L.D. Whatever the case may be, I'm insanely grateful to them. They introduced me to a hobby that still takes over every free minute I have and led me to a lifelong appreciation of all things gaming and nerdy. As a PS to the story, the games I got were pretty damn random, but for funny reasons. My mom wanted to get me an educational game since I was 3 years old, so she suggested Sesame Street. My dad wanted me to have a fun game, so he suggested Super Mario Bros. 2. They both said fuck it and bought me both.
And that, my friends, is how I got my NES. Sadly, I actually don't have my NES anymore, and to be honest, I don't even know what the hell happened to it. I never broke it or sold it or anything like that, but I think it just got lost out of all the thousands of moves my parents did. I actually once confronted my parents and asked them, did you guys sell or destroy or throw away my NES? And they said they didn't know. They forgot. They have no idea what happened to it. But you know what? Regardless, they got me into gaming. That was my first system, so I think I could forgive them. If it's true, anyway. Let's move on to another Nintendo system.
Ah, the Nintendo 64. My first 3D video game system. Funny thing is, I didn't really want it until my parents convinced me to get it. You see, one day my mom and dad walked in and asked me what I wanted for Christmas. I was a simple boy with simple needs and only asked for Sonic Blast on Sega Genesis. Side note, horrible fucking game! Anyway, they asked me, "That's it?" Really uncertain like, and I told them, "Yeah, like, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? I'm doing you a favor asking for just a game for Christmas." Anyway, a few weeks passed and my dad told me we were going to go to Toys R Us, and that he wanted to show me this new Nintendo system that was really cool. I was sort of a Sonic the Hedgehog fanboy at the time and scoffed at the idea, but I figured I might be able to score Sonic Blast earlier if I win. So anyway, we went to Toys R Us and they showed me the demo kiosk, which some fucking kid was hogging up for like 30 minutes. And I had to say, it was fucking magical. It was like nothing I had ever seen. Mario in 3D is like a no-brainer now, but back then it was the quintessential moment that declared 3D the way of the future. So I started playing the game, which, by the way, I didn't know how to hold the controller.
No, dumbass, the other way!
Sorry, Dad! After getting the hang of it, I knew this had to be mine. My parents had done it again. I said fuck Sonic Blast and received an N64 for Christmas. I remember right before Christmas, my family and I saw the Schwarzenegger movie Jingle All the Way. I asked my parents, was it hard to get an N64 for me? Was it like Jingle All the Way? And all my dad said was,
no.
Then it got awkwardly quiet on the ride back home. Funny PS to the story, I had an old as shit TV that needed that stupid RF adapter to have the N64 connect to it, and unfortunately my parents didn't know about it, so come Christmas morning, I wasn't able to play my N64 and was pretty pissed. I ended up sleeping over my friend's house that night, to which my dad was like,
who the fuck sleeps over a friend's house on Christmas Day?
And we played Super Mario 64, Wave Race 64, and Pilot Wing 64. I know, the 64 at the end of every title gimmick was fucking stupid. But that, my friends, is how I got my N64.
I think we have time for one more story. I never told the story of how I got my Wii, and that was pretty recent, I guess. So travel back with me, dear viewer, to the year 2006.
So here's where I was in 2006. A year into college, gained a shitload of weight, and had just gotten my first job working at a Planet X, which is sort of like a GameStop. I mean, it's owned by GameStop and acted like a GameStop, but was called Planet X. I was slowly getting back into gaming after taking a brief 2-year break to be in a band and try to get laid in high school. On a side note, I actually met my future wife instead. Thanks to PSP and Nintendo's DS, I was pretty excited for the then next generation of gaming. I was going to get a PS3 for MGS4, but my friend kept telling me about the new Nintendo console codenamed Revolution. The more he told me, the more interested I was in buying one. I ended up saying fuck it, and decided to get both systems. The job at Planet X was essential to getting the two, so I was really happy I was able to pre-order one and work there to pay it off. So let me explain how Planet X was. There were 4 classes of employees. Myself and all the other seasonals, the dudes who had worked there for a while and were really cool, a giant asshole of an assistant manager, and the actual manager who was really cool. The asshole of an assistant manager, who will now be referred to as Ass, was an ass. He was that one generic douchebag who thought he had power and was going to be a manager of his store one day, so he let it go to his head. Everyone ignored him just so he'd get promoted and leave the store, and I did the same. The day of launch, I was waiting in line and Ass was working that night. Ass started walking down the line, making sure everyone had already paid off their system and received their ticket. That way they could walk in, hand over their ticket, and pick up their console. He saw me in line and said, "Did you get a number?" I told him, "What?" Ass then randomly grabbed me by my shirt and dragged me to the front of the store. Then he said, "Yeah, man, you have to pay off your system first. You work at the store and you didn't know that?" Did anyone tell you anything? Did they? He slowly started trailing off because I didn't say a word to him. I looked at him like this the whole time he was talking to me. Anyway, I went back in line, waited an hour, and at 11:45ish was surprised by my friends who showed up to surprise hang with me / check out the Wii back at my parents' house. When 12 o'clock midnight struck, I went in, picked up my console, looked at ass for a second, and went back home with my friends to play some Wii. It was my first midnight launch for a game console, and I have to say that hanging with my friends made it pretty damn fun. If not for ass being a douche, it would have been perfect.
Well guys, that about wraps it up for today's episode. We are going to have more console stories in the future though, so be on the lookout for those. But in the meantime, why not post a comment down below of a story you guys might have? Something interesting that happened when you picked up your consoles for the first time. Or if you have an idea for a story you'd want me to tell, or a system you want me to tell, go ahead and leave a comment down below as well. In the meantime, do click subscribe if you like what you saw. Join the CR Happen Army. Help me build an army to take on all these videos I'm doing. And also be on the lookout for more Retrospectives-Be-Damned videos, Nerd Room Tour series, and the various playthroughs I do. Plus, we're going to have a couple of other surprises coming on the way, I think. Anyway, guys, thank you again so much for watching. And, of course, always remember, Retrospectives-Be-Damned, I'm telling my story.